A whistle cuts through the noise. For one heartbeat, everything stops. Your hands are on the ladder. The man beside you is praying, or maybe only breathing. It is 7:30 in the morning, the 1st of July, 1916. You are a British soldier on the opening day of the Battle of the Somme, and you are about to go over the top. That phrase sounds almost gentle now. It was not. Going over the top meant climbing out of the relative safety of your trench, up and over the parapet, the raised bank of earth at the front lip of the trench, and walking forward into the open, out into no man's land, the cratered strip of ground between your line and the enemy's. There was no cover out there. There was only distance, and whatever the Germans had waiting in it. So how did anyone survive that walk? To understand the answer, you first have to understand what you have been promised. For 7 days and 7 nights, the British guns have not stopped. More than 1.5 million shells have fallen on the German lines. A bombardment so enormous that people heard the rumble across the channel in southern England. You have been told the barbed wire is cut. You have been told the German trenches are flattened, their defenders dead or broken. You have been told you will stroll across, almost unopposed, and simply occupy what is left. You believe it. You have to believe it. The men in command believe it too. General Sir Douglas Haig and General Sir Henry Rawlinson have staked the plan on those guns. The artillery will do the dying for you. The thinking goes, and the infantry will merely walk in and hold the ground. But here is what you cannot see. On the other side of no man's land, the German defenders are not crouched in shallow ditches. Along much of this front, they have burrowed deep into the chalk, into dugouts 20 and 30 feet underground, timbered and reinforced, fitted with bunks and stores. A dugout is just a shelter cut into the trench wall. These are something closer to caves. For a week, your shells have shrieked overhead, and for a week, most of those men have waited far below, deafened and terrified, but alive. Then, at 7:30, your guns lift. They stop hammering the front line and reach for targets deeper behind it. The silence that follows is the signal for you to climb. It is also a starting gun for the enemy. Now the race begins. The race to the parapet. Your officers raise their whistles to their lips and blow, and you haul yourself up the ladder. At the very same moment, beneath the German line, men are pouring up out of those deep dugouts, dragging their machine guns to the surface, threading in the long belts of ammunition. The MG-08, the German heavy machine gun, was fed by fabric belts of cartridges and could fire 400 to 500 rounds a minute. One gun, well placed, could rake an entire field on its own. And there were many guns. In several sectors, you have been ordered to advance at a walking pace, in long, even lines, each man carrying close to 60 pounds of equipment. Historians still argue about how widespread and how rigid that walking order really was. Martin Middlebrook, who interviewed hundreds of survivors for his book The First Day on the Somme, gathered the testimony that fixed the image in our minds. Later historians have pushed back and called the picture more complicated. But across too much of that front, the result was the same. Men stood up in the open, in daylight, and walked toward machine guns that had survived the week-long storm. Think about what that meant for the men of one battalion. The 1st Newfoundland Regiment went into action that morning near a village called Beaumont Hamel. Roughly 800 men climbed out and started forward. The next day, when the roll was called, only about 68 answered. The rest were dead, wounded, or missing. An entire community gone in a single morning. Or take the Accrington Pals, men from a single Lancashire town who had enlisted together so they could serve together. They attacked toward the village of Serre. Of the roughly 700 who went forward, the great majority were killed, wounded, or missing within about half an hour. Half an hour. The same neighborhoods, the same streets, the same families, hollowed out before lunch. So, again, how did anyone survive? Here's the part the simple story leaves out. survival on the 1st of July was not, mostly, a question of courage. The brave and the frightened fell together. It was very largely a question of where you happened to be standing. In the north of the battlefield, around Serre, Beaumont, Hemel, and Thiepval, the bombardment had failed. The wire was not cut. The dugouts were not destroyed. The defenders won the race to the parapet, and the attacking battalions were cut down in their hundreds. But further south, near the villages of Montauban and Mametz, the story was different. There the artillery had done much more of its work. The German positions were more thoroughly broken, and supporting fire was better organized. In those sectors, British troops reached their objectives and held them at a cost that, by the standards of that terrible day, was almost bearable. John Keegan, in his classic study, The Face of Battle, walks carefully through exactly this contrast between collapse in the north and success in the south. Two men could go over the top at the same minute, with the same training and the same fear, and one would be walking into a massacre, while the other walked into a fight he might actually win. The difference was a few miles of front and a plan that worked in some places and failed in others. And then there was luck, the kind no plan could give you. The men who lived often lived because of the ground, a fold in the earth, a shell crater to roll into, the instinct to go flat and crawl rather than stand and walk. Many survivors described the same thing. You got down fast, you pressed yourself into the dirt, and you waited, sometimes for hours, until darkness let you drag yourself back. Surviving the open ground was less about advancing bravely than about not being upright when the gun swept your way. Now, count the cost. By the end of that single day, the British Army had suffered around 57,470 casualties. Of those, roughly 19,240 were killed. It remains the bloodiest single day in the entire history of the British Army, not the bloodiest battle, the bloodiest day. And because so many units were Paul's battalions, razed street by street and factory by factory, the grief did not scatter evenly across the country. It fell in concentrated blows. A telegram boy could turn into a single town and carry word to 40 homes on the same afternoon. The battle did not end there. The Somme ground on until the 18th of November, 1916. By the time it stopped, the combined casualties on all sides ran past 1 million men. The British and Commonwealth losses alone were over 400,000. German losses were also enormous, though the exact figure is still disputed among historians and depends on how the records are counted. For a few miles of shattered French farmland, walk that ground today, and it is quiet. The craters have softened into green hollows, and on a low ridge stands the Thiepval Memorial, a vast brick and stone arch designed by Edwin Lutyens. Carved into it are the names of more than 72,000 British and South African men who died on the Somme and have no known grave, no headstone, no body ever found or identified. Just a name cut into stone, one of 72,000, because that was all that was left to bury. When people ask how anyone survived going over the top, the honest answer is uncomfortable. Many did not. Those who did often survived not because they were braver or stronger, but because of where they stood, how fast they fell, and 100 small mercies of luck, and ground that they could neither earn nor control. They climbed a ladder into the open and put their lives in the hands of chance, and chance kept some and took the rest. That is the weight behind the phrase. Not a heroic stride into glory, but ordinary men, laden and afraid, doing the hardest thing a person can be asked to do, and most of them never even reaching the enemy line. So, when you hear those 4 small words, going over the top, hold on to what they actually cost. A whistle, a ladder, a walk into the open, the tens of thousands never finished. A whistle cut through the noise that morning on the Somme. And for the men who climbed the ladder when it blew, Survival was never something they could win. It was something that happened to them, or didn't, in the space of a single breath.